Welcome back to last video before bed. Today we'll be reading crazy and frightening ex experiences from Reddit. Let's get started. So, I have a wild story about my ex that still gives me chills. A few years back, I dated someone who had a fascination with all things gothic and supernatural. At first it was cool, dark poetry, late-night movie marathons of horror films, and a shared love for Halloween. We would spend hours discussing the themes of our favorite horror flicks and even planned our outfits for the next Halloween months in advance. I thought I had found someone who truly understood my quirky interests and I was all in. But then things took a bizarre turn. One night, while we were hanging out in their dimly lit room, surrounded by candles and eerie decorations, they casually mentioned their vampire lifestyle. I chuckled, thinking they were making a joke, but they were dead serious. They started wearing fangs, insisting on only going out at night, and even wanted to find a blood donor. I laughed it off as a weird phase, but as the days went by, it became increasingly unsettling. At first, I thought it was just an elaborate bit they were putting on for fun. They would dress in long, dark cloaks and wear heavy eyeliner that made them look like they had stepped straight out of a gothic novel. There were even moments when they would whisper dramatically about the taste of life and how blood was the essence of existence. I rolled my eyes, but deep down I started to feel a creeping sense of dread. Things escalated quickly when they suggested we visit an old cemetery at midnight for a ritual. I hesitated but felt a mix of curiosity and obligation, partly because I was already so invested in the relationship and partly because I didn't want to seem cowardly. When we got there, the air was thick with an eerie silence, and the moonlight cast long shadows across the gravestones. Felt like something out of a horror story. As we wandered deeper into the cemetery, they began to chant softly, their voice rising and falling in a way that sent chills down my spine. They seemed to enter some kind of trance, swaying slightly as if pulled by an invisible force. I stood there, frozen, my pulse quickening. I was freaked out but didn't want to seem rude or alarm them, so I stayed quiet, my mind racing. Then, out of nowhere, they pulled out a small vial filled with what looked like fake blood. In the dim light, it glimmered ominously. They looked at me with those wide, intense eyes and insisted I drink it to seal our bond. My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. I felt trapped, like I was caught in a twisted fairy tale gone wrong. At that moment, I realized I needed to get out. I quickly made up an excuse about feeling sick, desperate to escape what was becoming a nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to leave the cemetery, my mind swirling with confusion and fear. A few days later, I finally broke things off. I thought it would be a clean break, but they didn't take it well. A few nights later, I heard a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, there they were, standing in the moonlight with a dozen roses in hand. The sight sent a chill down my spine. They handed me the flowers with a twisted smile and slipped a note into my hand that read, "I will always find you, my eternal love." My heart sank. It felt like a line from a horror movie. I was terrified and felt an overwhelming urge to protect myself. That night, I ended up changing my locks and keeping the lights on. To this day, I still wonder if they were just playing a part or if they truly believed they were a vampire. Did they genuinely think they needed to drink blood to live? The thought haunted me for weeks. I even questioned whether I had missed signs of something deeper during our time together. Either way, it was one of the craziest and scariest experiences of my life, and it taught me to trust my instincts. So, I have a crazy and scary story about my ex that I never thought I'd share, but here it goes. A couple of years ago, I was in a relationship with someone who seemed perfect at first. They were charming, funny, and loved animals, especially my puppy Max. Max was my pride and joy, a little golden retriever that I adopted when he was just a few months old. I couldn't imagine my life without him. First, my ex adored Max. They would take him for walks, play fetch in the park, and even spoil him with treats. It was heartwarming to see them bond, but things started to change when I noticed my ex becoming increasingly possessive of both me and Max. They would get upset if I spent time with friends without them or if I took Max to the park alone. I brushed it off as jealousy, thinking it would pass. Then came the night that turned everything upside down. I had planned to go out with some friends for dinner, and I decided to leave Max at home with my ex. I thought it would be a fun night for them to hang out. When I returned home late, I found the apartment eerily quiet. I called out for my ex and Max, but there was no response. My heart started racing as I searched the living room and kitchen, nothing. Finally, I heard a soft whimper coming from the bedroom. When I opened the door, I was met with a chilling sight. My ex was sitting on the floor, cradling Max tightly in their arms, whispering softly to him. It felt wrong. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. I asked what was going on, and my ex looked up at me with wide eyes, a strange smile on their face. I was just showing him how much I love him, they said, but it didn't sit right with me. Things only got worse from there. My ex started making comments about how they could take better care of Max and how we would make a great family together without ever mentioning me. I tried to brush it off, thinking they were just being overly affectionate, but it started to feel like an obsession. I felt like I was losing my puppy, and it terrified me. One night, after a particularly tense argument, I decided to take Max for a late-night walk to clear my head. I left my phone at home, thinking it would be a quick outing. As we walked through the quiet streets, I suddenly felt like we were being followed. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. I quickened my pace, and so did the footsteps behind me. My heart raced as I realized I wasn't just being paranoid. Someone was definitely following us. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and took a deep breath, relieved to be home. But just as I sat down on the couch with Max, there was a loud banging on the door. I felt my blood run cold. I peeked through the peephole and saw my ex looking frantic and wild-eyed. "Let me in. I know you're in there," they screamed. Panic set in and I called the police. While I waited for help to arrive, I heard my ex pounding on the door, shouting about how I was keeping Max from them, and how they would do anything to have him. It was like a scene from a horror movie. When the police finally showed up, my ex had already fled the scene and they couldn't find them. After that, I decided to take some serious precautions. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and even stayed with friends for a while. I couldn't shake the feeling that my ex would return to try and take Max. Thankfully, they never did. Now Max is my little shadow and I keep him close. Sometimes I still get anxious when I hear a knock at the door or see someone who looks like my ex, but I've learned to trust my instincts and protect my little buddy. I have a crazy and scary story about my ex that I still can't shake off. A couple of years ago, I was in a relationship with this girl named Sarah. We met at a local LGBTQ+ event and hit it off instantly. She was charming, funny, and we shared a lot of the same interests. Everything seemed perfect at first, and I fell head over heels for her. As our relationship progressed, though, I started to notice some red flags. Sarah was incredibly affectionate and wanted to spend every waking moment together. While I loved that she cared so much, it quickly turned into possessiveness. She would get upset if I spent time with my friends or even if I didn't respond to her texts immediately. I tried to talk to her about it, but she would always brush it off, claiming she just loved me deeply. One weekend, I decided to go on a girls' trip with my friends to celebrate a birthday. I thought it would be a nice break for both of us. Sarah seemed fine at first, but the day we left, she sent me a series of increasingly frantic texts. She wanted to know who I was with, what we were doing, and when I would be back. It made me uncomfortable, but I figured she was just missing me. The trip was fun, but when I returned home, I found a note taped to my front door. It read, "I hope you had fun with your friends. I missed you." My heart sank. I opened the door, and as I stepped inside, something felt off. My things were slightly moved around, and I noticed that my favorite hoodie was missing. I brushed it off, thinking I might have misplaced it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's behavior became more erratic. She started showing up unannounced at my work and following me around town. I would catch her lurking outside my favorite coffee shop or waiting near my gym. It was unnerving, but every time I confronted her, she would apologize, claiming she was just trying to surprise me or check on me. Things came to a head one night when I invited some friends over for a small gathering. Sarah showed up uninvited and immediately demanded to know who everyone was. She was clearly upset and started accusing me of hiding things from her. I tried to calm her down, but the situation escalated quickly. In a fit of rage, she knocked over a lamp, shattering it on the floor. My friends were understandably uncomfortable, and I had to ask Sarah to leave. After that night, I knew I needed to end things. I broke up with her the following week, and she didn't take it well. I thought I had made it clear, but she insisted that we were meant to be together and that I was making a huge mistake. I stood my ground, and after a tense conversation she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. A few days later, I began receiving strange messages on social media. It was Sarah sending me long, frantic texts about how much she loved me and how she couldn't live without me. Some messages were sweet, but others were downright creepy, filled with threats about what she would do if I didn't come back to her. One night, I heard a knock at my window around midnight. I lived on the second floor, and when I looked out, I was horrified to see Sarah standing there, looking up at me with a wild expression in her eyes. I quickly pulled the curtains shut and called the police. They arrived shortly after, but by that time she had already vanished into the night. I ended up getting a restraining order, and thankfully things calmed down after that. It took a while for me to feel safe again, but I learned a valuable lesson about recognizing red flags in relationships. Now I'm much more cautious about who I let into my life. So if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, trust your instincts. Sometimes love can turn into something dark and scary, and it's crucial to prioritize your safety above all else. Stay safe out there. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but I saw this Ask Reddit question and knew I could answer it. It all started about a year ago when I began dating Jessica. She seemed perfect at first, funny, charming, and adventurous. We had a whirlwind romance that lasted about 6 months. But everything changed when I decided to break up with her. I'd noticed some red flags during our relationship. Jessica was possessive and would often get jealous over the smallest things. When I finally found the courage to end things, I hoped she'd take it well. I was wrong. At first, it was just a few texts here and there begging me to reconsider. I blocked her number thinking that would end it. But she wasn't done. A few days later, I got a friend request from her on social media. I ignored it, but then I started receiving emails filled with long messages about how we were meant to be, and how I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Things escalated quickly. One evening, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. I was immediately on edge and called the police. When they arrived, they found nothing, but I knew deep down that it was Jessica. I decided to take matters into my own hands and reached out to a mutual friend to warn her about Jessica's behavior. My friend told me she had been acting strangely, showing up at places I frequented, asking about my schedule, and even trying to get information from my coworkers. I felt like I was being watched. One weekend, I went to a party at a friend's house, hoping to escape the chaos. Halfway through the night, I spotted Jessica across the room. She was staring at me with an unsettling smile, and my heart dropped. I tried to leave, but she followed me outside. "Why are you avoiding me?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with something darker. I told her to leave me alone, but she stepped closer, her demeanor shifting. "You can't get rid of me that easily," she whispered, and in that moment I was truly terrified. After that night, I decided to take serious action. I filed a restraining order against her, hoping it would be enough to keep her away. The police were sympathetic, but Jessica seemed to vanish after that. I thought I was finally free. A few weeks later, I received an anonymous package at my doorstep. Inside was a photo of me taken through my window, along with a note that read, "You'll always be mine." I was horrified. I called the police again, but they couldn't do much without evidence of her being there. Eventually, I moved to another city, changed my number, and cut ties with everyone who knew me there. It's been months, and I still feel the anxiety creeping in whenever I hear a noise outside or see someone who resembles her. I've been hesitant to share this story, but it's one of those experiences that still haunts me. A couple of years ago, I was in a relationship with a girl named Lily. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was charming, intelligent, and had a laugh that could light up the room. We shared countless late-night talks, spontaneous adventures, and a connection that felt unbreakable. However, as time went on, I began to notice her jealousy and possessiveness creeping in. It started with small things. She would get upset if I spent time with friends or if I liked a photo of a girl on social media. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase. But as the months went by, her behavior became more controlling, and I eventually realized that I needed to break up with her for my own sanity. After we split, I thought I was free. I started dating someone new, let's call her Mia. Mia was everything I wanted: supportive, kind, and fun to be around. She brought light into my life after the darkness of my previous relationship. We enjoyed exploring new places, binge-watching shows, and simply being together. But the moment Lily found out I was seeing someone else, all hell broke loose. It started with a few nasty texts. Lily would message me repeatedly, calling Mia names and threatening to ruin my life if I didn't break up with her. At first, I thought it was just empty threats, a way for her to lash out and regain control. I tried to ignore it, but then things escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. One night, Mia and I went out for dinner at a nice restaurant. We were laughing and having a great time, but as we were leaving, I noticed a figure lurking in the shadows. My gut twisted with unease. I brushed it off as paranoia, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. When we got home, Mia received a text from an unknown number. "You better watch your back. I won't let you take him away from me." That's when I knew I had to take this seriously. I warned Mia about Lily's unstable behavior, and we decided it would be best to keep our distance from her. We even considered blocking her on social media and changing our numbers, but I was hesitant. I didn't want to escalate things further. However, Lily wasn't done. A few days later, Mia and I were hanging out at my place, enjoying a quiet evening. Suddenly, we heard a loud crash outside. My heart dropped as I ran to the window, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Lily was outside, smashing the windows of my car with a baseball bat, her face twisted in rage. I immediately called the police, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. By the time they arrived, Lily was gone, leaving behind a scene of destruction and a lingering sense of dread. After that night, I thought things couldn't get worse. But then I received a chilling message from Mia late one night. She texted me saying she felt someone watching her from outside her apartment. My heart raced as I rushed over to her place, panic setting in. When I arrived, I found a note taped to her door that read, "Stay away from him or else." The note was accompanied by a photo of us together, taken without our knowledge. That's when things took a terrifying turn. I decided it was time to seriously involve the authorities. I filed a restraining order against Lily, providing the police with all the evidence I had: texts, the note, and witness accounts of her behavior. But it seemed like she always managed to slip through the cracks, and her obsession only deepened. One evening, Mia and I were at my house again, trying to enjoy a quiet night in. We were curled up on the couch watching a movie when suddenly we heard loud banging on the door. My heart raced as I looked through the peephole, only to see Lily standing there, her eyes wild and filled with fury. I quickly called the police, trying to keep Mia calm while fear coursed through my veins. When the police arrived, they found Lily hiding in the bushes with a kitchen knife, muttering about how she was going to take care of Mia. I was paralyzed with fear as they arrested her. I thought that would be the end of it, that I could finally breathe again. However, even after her arrest, the fear lingered. The police assured us that she would be kept away, but something about the whole situation felt unresolved. We decided to move to a different city, change our numbers, and try to start fresh. It was a drastic decision, but it felt necessary for our safety. In our new city, we slowly began to rebuild our lives. Mia and I found a cozy apartment, made new friends, and even started planning a little vacation. But the shadows of our past loomed over us. It's been over a year now, and while I feel safer, there are moments when I still look over my shoulder, worried that she might come back. The worst part is the psychological impact this whole situation has had on both of us. Mia sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night, scared that someone is outside. I've become hypervigilant, checking the locks on the doors multiple times before bed. So please, if you're ever in a relationship and see signs of possessiveness or jealousy, don't ignore them. It can turn into a nightmare faster than you can imagine. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to take action. Stay safe, Reddit. You should buckle up because I've got a wild story that still gives me chills. This happened a few years ago with my ex-girlfriend Sarah, who turned out to be much more than I ever realized. We had been dating for about a year, but things took a turn when I noticed some strange behaviors. She would often get upset if I mentioned my female friends, and I caught her going through my phone more than once. Eventually, I decided enough was enough and broke it off. I thought I could just move on, but boy was I wrong. A few weeks after our breakup, I got a series of bizarre texts from unknown numbers. They were just random pictures of me at various places. At first, I thought it was a prank until one of the images showed me leaving a cafe I frequent. An icy dread settled in my stomach. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just a coincidence, but deep down I felt like I was being watched. Things escalated when I returned to my apartment one evening to find my door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, ready to confront whatever was inside. To my horror, everything seemed untouched, but there was a strange smell like incense mixed with something rotten. I turned on the lights, and that's when I noticed it. In the corner of my living room there was a makeshift shrine. Candles flickered around a photo of me that I didn't even know she had taken. Surrounding the photo were various trinkets: a lock of my hair that I had lost, a worn-out ticket from a concert we attended, and even a small doll that looked eerily like me. It was the stuff of nightmares. I froze, panic setting in. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Just as I was about to bolt, I noticed a note written in a shaky hand. It read, "You're mine forever. No one can take you from me." I grabbed my phone and called the police, but as I waited outside I felt like I was losing my mind. Was this real? How could someone I once loved turn into this? The officers arrived and examined the shrine, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. They filed a report and assured me they'd look into it, but I knew deep down that I needed to take matters into my own hands. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days, but every noise, every shadow made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there watching me. After a week of paranoia, I returned to my apartment with a friend to grab some essentials. As we entered, I noticed that the shrine was gone, but the feeling of dread lingered. I filed for a restraining order against Sarah, but she was nowhere to be found. A few weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. It simply said, "You can't escape me." I've since moved, but I still look over my shoulder every time I hear a noise. I've even considered getting a security system. I don't know what happened to Sarah, but I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Almost 2 years ago, I broke up with my girlfriend, Emily. The relationship had been intense, but it became clear that her possessiveness was spiraling out of control. After a particularly heated argument, I packed my bags, moved out, and decided to start fresh in a quiet neighborhood far from her. Little did I know that was the worst decision I could have made. About 2 weeks after I moved in, I started to notice strange things happening. I'd see someone lurking in the shadows outside my window or hear footsteps when I was sure I was alone. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, I had just gone through a tough breakup. But then I began to notice something unsettling. The house next door was being renovated. One evening, I was outside watering my plants when I saw a familiar face peeking through the fence. My heart sank as I recognized Emily. She had moved in next door. I felt a rush of dread wash over me. How could she have found me so quickly? I thought I had escaped her grasp. For the next few days, things took a turn for the worse. She would stand outside staring at my house for hours, watching my every move. I'd find notes slipped into my mailbox that said things like, "I miss you," and "You'll come back to me." It was like she was trying to reel me back in, and I was terrified. One night, I decided to confront her. I knocked on her door, my heart racing. When she opened it, I was met with a smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Surprise! We're neighbors now," she chirped as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I tried to keep my composure, telling her that this wasn't okay, that I wanted her to leave me alone. But instead of backing off, she became even more erratic. I'd come home to find my belongings scattered across my yard, as if she was trying to provoke me. My friends started to notice her strange behavior too. They would often catch her staring at me from her window, and I could see the concern on their faces. Things escalated one night when I heard loud banging on my front door. I peered through the peephole and saw Emily, her face twisted in anger. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, she had vanished. They assured me they'd keep an eye on the area, but I felt alone and vulnerable. After a few weeks of this torment, I decided to take drastic measures. I installed cameras around my property and kept my doors locked at all times. I even spoke to a lawyer about getting a restraining order, but I was terrified of what she might do if she found out. Then came the night that changed everything. I awoke to a loud crash coming from my kitchen. Groggy and panicked, I crept out of bed, heart pounding. As I reached the kitchen, I froze. There was Emily, standing in the dim light, holding a knife and smiling like she was in a trance. "I just wanted to cook for us," she said in a sing-song voice. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. I managed to run out the back door and into the neighbor's yard, frantically dialing 911. The police arrived quickly and apprehended her, but I was left shaken and terrified. Emily was taken away, but the experience left a scar.